let's call it at 6:31. Start the meeting. Welcome, everyone. Particularly welcome to Rebecca Tuttle, Becky, as she goes by, our town treasurer collector. She is here tonight to help us go through the bond package and kind of see where we stand as far as making any recommendations going forward and how it fits in, what you have available, all that stuff.
Right.
We'll do the minutes, and then we'll go right into the bond package. And what I'd like to know is, where do we stand on the current bond package, and then how does that work into the next one?
Perfect.
Okay. Minutes, everybody had a chance to read them?
I did not.
Yes, just that
one little
correction.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I saw too.
I have Dan listed as absent because he was at the previous meeting and I used the same form to start with.
Did a good job, Mike.
It's easy when you can review the video.
Yeah.
That's true.
You know, while I'm going over this, I saw in your note that Seth's air compressor jumped from 65 to 95.
Yeah, that's what Gary
I'm
does.
trying to figure out why, so we gotta get Seth, or call Seth and talk to him and find out why we had a $30,000 jump in 1 year.
Yeah.
What
well,
changed?
And also, if it's going to keep going up, then buy it quick.
Well,
That's
that's-
really-
Should have bought it a year ago.
Yeah.
I talked to Seth, I don't know if I told you.
Yeah, we first talked about it a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
I talked to Seth on the fire truck, and he said if you put the order in today, you may not get it till 2024.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gary had said that
Yeah,
at the last meeting, but
yeah, he said it's not a question of them building it, it's a question they can't get the parts.
well,
So
it's
anyways,
a moot
that's,
point that if he doesn't get a grant, have to float a bond for that thing.
and I don't even know where he stands on grants right now either, so we're gonna have to talk to him with that.
Well,
at the next
I'm
meeting.
betting he's been keeping up on that because he's brought that up several times
Yeah.
over the last couple of years.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from August 25th.
With the amendment?
Right.
Okay.
As amended.
As amended.
Second.
Oh, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
so moved. Okay. Good deal. Do you have anything to do with ARPA funds?
I'm on the committee.
Okay.
That's something.
So, yeah.
Definitely something.
Yep.
There are some things that we were discussing regarding ARPA funding, and we were wondering why it would be ARPA funded versus other types of ways to do it. Why spend ARPA money on something like that? So as we go through, that's good, because that might come up in our discussion
Okay.
tonight, so maybe you can help us there. I got Joe Buckley sent around a stormwater notice that he is looking for a street sweeper because of the impact of all the dirt and residue and that stuff that goes down into the storm drains. So I was reading a little bit about the stormwater, whatever it is, I forget what it's called here. But anyways, I was reading a little about that, and it seems like that's a national thing, let alone a state thing that's going on.
Yeah.
So if you would mind, kind of tell us where we stand on the bond package.
So this is kind of like a summary of all of the debt. The first page is the general fund, and it kind of goes by fiscal year where we're at, and shows you where we're dropping off. I highlighted FY24 for you on there.
Okay.
And what's been going on is we've been paying off debt. And we refinanced, actually in November, we refinanced some of the USDA fund debt that we had that was out 40 some odd years, and we had 20 years left, and the debt was at like 3 to 4%, so we refinanced it for 1.7, I think was the rate that we got, so we saved quite a bit of money.
Same term.
What's that?
Same term.
Yeah, for 20 years, because we had
24 years.
so we knocked off We
I didn't know if
paid
the
down.
debt, the term had shrunken any. That's what I was
No,
asking.
no,
Okay.
still 21. That's the public safety building and the DPW garage that's
Mhm.
on there, on the first two. But we're saving like at least $1 million over the life of the loans by refinancing, just by dropping that interest rate. So as you can see, the debt is dropping off. We're paying things off. Most recently, like the Naquag renovations, there was a $60,000. Last year was the last payment on that for $60,000. That was excluded, so it came off, directly off of the tax rates. So that's the difference in, you guys are all familiar, I know you are, between excluded and non-excluded debt. Excluded debt is
Okay.
directly tacked on the tax rate. Non-excluded is built into what we can afford for debt. I don't know if I'm explaining that correct enough, but what I did, I highlighted 2024 on here, and I actually reached out to our financial advisor to, as the debt drops off, the goal is to keep it at a certain level, which I think I've emailed you or talked about this with Joe before, because you don't want it all to drop off and you get this, you don't have any more debt, you have this lot of capacity, and then all of a sudden you borrow something and you're don't have any more capacity, your debt goes up and that type of stuff. So you want to keep it at a steady level, which helps with your infrastructure and borrowing,
Right.
just to kind of keep things going. So we're getting to a point where it, and I think our financial policies say we want to keep it at about a 5%. 5% of our total budget. So what our financial advisor did was kind of went through and said, what if we were to keep, which over on the orange side of this, we were to keep our debt at that 4 to 5% of budget, what increase in debt service could we do as things are dropping off? And that assumes a 3.5% increase on our budget year over year. So as you can see that like in FY24, to keep our debt service at 880, or at 5%, we could borrow an additional we could incur debt that would put on the tax rate $880,000. I know that's kind of confusing.
No.
But-
Well, 880, I'm not quite sure what that means. Is that an additional per year?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you look at the third page, is like a sample, because Joe had asked about,
That's not the payment, that's the amount of debt we could incur that the payment would be on.
right.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
so if we borrowed $2 million, that's where I was going with if we borrowed $2 million for road repairs, we could borrow that over 15 years, which the last page kind of gives you an idea of what the debt service would be for $2 million on 15 years with a coupon rate of 3.85. That would, each payment for the next 15 years would be, or a fiscal year is that 175.05 would be what it would be on 24. So that's what would be added on a $2 million borrowing for 15 years with a coupon of,
And that would
Interest
keep
rate.
the budget level with no tax changes.
right. So you want to keep it to that level as things come off. It gets complicated, and if we wanted to have Brian, who was our financial advisor, come in and talk, you could get closer and closer, but I figured this would get you
Right.
thinking about it and get you more
Kind of
familiar with.
package we could recommend.
Right, for all the items that are out there, because I haven't been to your meetings because, so I've seen, I think Gary gave me the list of our 5-year projects that are out
Yes.
there and stuff like that,
But we've been looking at things above and beyond all that 5-year capital projects.
right.
Ron Sanangelo had got us rolling
Mhm.
on this idea of bond packages to fund things.
Right.
For instance, some of the infrastructure needs of buildings and
Yes.
whatnot,
Yeah.
or possibly all the town parking lots, or
Right,
things like this that have been neglected for a long
right,
time.
right.
This would be 2024, we'd be looking to borrow 2 million. Or is that-
Are you asking me, or, because I'm not sure what your timeline is for some of the repairs and that type of stuff.
Well, no, I'm just looking at a date here.
Right, there could be, so if you look at kind of this big picture, there, in non-excluded debt, there, that land acquisition has 35,000 that's coming off. That's the last year in 2024. It's also last year of Rutland Heights and ambulance, those are excluded though. So you'd wanna add, I mean, we did have that 60,000, so if you do the 60 and the 30 are coming off, you wanna put something close to that back on there, not to, so you wouldn't have a it's in the next couple years,
Right.
is what I would say.
Can I just make sure I understand the orange box, Becky?
Okay.
The increase in debt service available. I just want to make sure I understand if that's the annual debt service payment, or if that's the amount that can be borrowed in total.
No,
That would make a
that
big-
would be a debt service payment.
So what does that equal, like $880,000 in a debt service payment? What does that equal as far as a bond?
So if you look at this $2 million is $175,000 a year.
All right, so
You
we're
know what
looking
I
at 4 or 5
Yeah.
times that. 4 times,
Right.
so upwards of $10 million, $9 million.
Yeah.
And borrowing to back into that debt service payment. It's a lot
Right,
of
and
money.
that, right, exactly. And that's in our financial policies to keep it at that 5%. Right now, as you can see, and this is non-excluded debt that she did this calculation on.
Oh.
So right now, we're at 2.19% of non-excluded debt compared to, well, right now, that was in 2021. So what year are we in? 2023, we're at 1.84% of our budget for non-excluded debt.
Out of that 5%.
Right. So we've already dropped quite a bit. So it's the financial policies to say to stay about the 5%, but you don't have to go all the way up to that. I mean, it's a fine balance as to, we need to do things. Debt is dropping off and it's coming down.
So that
And it's-
theoretically, like, there could be a number in under 2022 here as well. If we're under now, to get up to that 5%, there should be some buffer.
Right.
Is
So
that buffer
there's
the-
room to
There's already
put a bond together for
There's already room even
some
before more stuff
kind of
starts
work
dropping
that the
off.
town might
Yeah.
really need.
Right, because we did have,
In each year, that amount would grow that could be borrowed.
right, do we have that big one on here that dropped off?
So,
Let's go, yeah,
Becky,
yeah,
that 880,000 is our annual payment that is coming off.
no, that we
That's the extra.
could take on debt with a annual payment of an additional 880.
Okay, so that 880 then would be between the 1.75 and the 4.9, or that 1.75?
So it gets you to the 5.
It would get you to the 5, right?
So that 880,000 is really like 3%. 4%, yeah, 3% difference between one and the other. I'm trying to think.
Well,
about
no,
multiplier.
because that would be if the 880 was for this year, right now, because we're at the 1.74 whatever right now.
Right, right.
That doesn't mean we would be there in 2 years.
But I'm trying to figure out what multiplier to use. If we want to pay off the debt at 880 a year, is that what you're saying? Or
No.
175 a year?
That's how much more we want to be spending per
Right.
year.
So right now, the excluded total of our, well, for FY '24, what we have what's gonna be our debt service for FY '24 is $547,000. The excluded total, just before you get to the orange box.
Mhm.
Yep, 547, it's highlighted in yellow under this column,
Oh, okay,
right?
547.
That's the number. Like in
That-
FY '23, it's 563, that's our excluded total. In FY '24, it's gonna be 547,000.
So that 547 is coming off.
That's what we're paying, in FY '24,
Okay,
which is 1.75% of our annual budget, which we're assuming a 3.5% increase is that 27 million.
Basically, the town still has some borrowing power
so
available
we
to
have.
it. And that'll increase over the next
880,000.
couple of years.
So the difference
And it's
between
been
the
dropping every year.
547 and 880 is what we have to borrow.
Right, so don't, if you added, to get to that 5%, you could we have 547 in debt payments scheduled. We could add debt that would cost us $880,000 for that year to get to that 5%,
Oh, so it's 800 on top of,
yes.
okay.
But again, that seems, I mean, that's,
There must be other big ticket items coming up in town for other things, you know? If we need that new ambulance in 2 years, if we need a new ladder truck for
right,
next year.
the piece that
Those are all
now
added.
as I'm looking at it, that I wanna investigate is when was the last time we were at that 5%? You know what I mean? Because if we jump up to 5%, because we've already knocked it down quite a bit. I only have since 2021 on here. We're already at the point where if you jump it up to a 5%, you're gonna scare people. You know what I
Right, I mean,
It's gonna be a jump at this point.
yeah, in theory, it would leave the tax rate unchanged, though, right? The added borrowing, because other borrowing is coming off. You wouldn't have to raise taxes to cover these expenses.
Well, that's down, you would, because if you wanted to keep it at 1.8, the previous year, the 1.84, you'd only have the capacity for a lot less than that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So you have the capacity, and the financial policies say you want to stay at 5%, but we're already at 1.7.
We
It's
haven't
already
been
dropped.
at 5%
Yeah.
all along, so
Right. That's what,
in theory, the tax rate would have had to have been creeping up all along to keep up with that.
or just the debt would have had
Right.
to stay that
Right,
way, so.
okay.
How does, I can't remember how the financial policy reads, I don't know if you can either, but is it specific to tax levy debt service or just debt service in total, both outside and inside the tax levy?
I think it was excluded, I'm pretty sure.
So this-
And that's why Breon did it this way.
You mean non-excluded? Because this seems to be looking at
Oh, yes.
the percentage of non-excluded debt as a percentage of the budget. It doesn't take into account
Yep.
the excluded debt, right?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
looking at the wrong way, right.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
because excluded is just right on when that goes away, it comes off the tax rate.
and as soon as it comes off the tax rate, let's just level set,
Yeah.
right? So if let's say last year, whatever it was, 35.7 came off our debt service line item in the budget
Right.
because the land acquisition was paid off.
Mhm.
That 35.7 is not like it's sitting there and available, because I can guarantee you that 35.7 was put into some other line
It's
item in the operating
scooped up,
budget, so
right.
it's gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That's
Right.
what the
Yeah.
goal is to
Is
fill
to-
that 35.7 back up.
But the other thing that I think is probably a larger conversation beyond us is the appetite to, historically, in a lot of these projects, if you look at like the additional, any of these non-excluded projects, I think you could talk to half the people that would say it was a good idea to borrow for a big initiative like a building within the tax levy. And then the other half of the people would say, no, never borrow for a big project like that within the tax levy. You always exclude it, so you know the debt service is separated and you're not
It's gonna go
impacting your
away.
general
Exactly.
operating budget.
Right.
So I think the larger conversation is do we really, and that's why I want to look back at the policy too, to see what direction that's headed. If we go down the road of taking on long-term debt for long-term projects, what's the appetite to do it within the tax levy versus trying to go out for an exclusion?
Right,
Where you know the money's gonna be there year after year and you're not gonna have to fight a budget,
Right.
right.
you know? So
Right.
that's the other
I
piece
mean,
of this.
usually the excluded part is an easier sell, because then it's not bogging down your budget. But
It's an
we already
easier sell
have-
internal,
Exactly.
but it's a much harder sell at the voter, because it has to be voted.
Right,
So that's where it gets tough.
Everybody says no to my tax rate.
yeah, oh, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But that's why it makes sense if we look at, I think that conversation needs to be had first, and then whatever the outcome, let's say the outcome is, okay, there's probably a portion we want to keep within the levy and there's a portion we want to exclude, and that's when you're going to start talking about what those projects are and looking at when some of this debt excluded funds fall off, because that's really
Right.
where the tax rate impact occurs, right? Because when the debt excluded stuff, that debt is paid off, that's literally a decrease in the tax rate, whereas if it's non-excluded and that falls off, the tax rate's gonna remain the same because that money's gonna be used somewhere else. It's gonna get spent.
Yeah.
And I think if we're looking at keeping the tax rate level, we probably wanna look more at when the excluded stuff falls off and backfilling that with more excluded stuff.
Right. Which if you look, the Rutland Heights and this ambulance are coming off and well, the land acquisition is not excluded, and we already had that Naquag renovations came off this year. So that 60,000
It's,
that came off got scooped up into the budget.
Okay, so the 112
Or reduced the tax rate.
and the
yeah,
53
reduce the tax rate, yeah.
are coming off in '24.
And those are excluded.
Okay, so that.
Well, they're coming
can't-
off into 25, so that's the last payment in 24 for those.
So they can't be scooped up into the budget because they're excluded.
Correct. You
Okay,
got it.
I like that.
But also the authorization for the money is gone. Once the debt is gone, the town no longer has the authorization to spend those funds.
Right.
When the debt goes away,
Right.
the capacity to tax on it goes away too.
Right, and that's what I was looking at. Well, if there was 170,000 that the town could use and then put somewhere else, so having excluded debt outside
Right.
is, I can see now the benefit of that long-term.
Right.
But I
So
mean, and
nobody can do
that's
monkey
a
business
a
with
selling
it.
point too, is like, if, say, in 2025, we go for a debt exclusion for a fire truck or whatever, and say, this is not gonna be a minimal impact because you were used to paying this, you know what I mean? And we're improving the
Right.
town, we're investing in our infrastructure, we're borrowing this money excluded, because these pieces are coming off in that year.
Yeah,
And
it's-
there's a
So it levels.
There's a
that.
limit to how long you can borrow for different things.
Correct, correct.
Like a
Yes.
new school or a new town building.
Right. Like in this road situation,
Yeah.
we can only, a maximum for roads is 15 years.
Would that
For
also
these-
include any kind of paving, like town lots and stuff? Or
I believe so. I believe
Yeah.
that's what she did this for.
Yeah.
But like a building, I believe is 20 years
yeah.
that you can go out.
So-
All the water and sewer improvements, the capital improvements, which we kind of the amounts got mixed up because some of the items, they had like 5 years of plan, and some of them were water main or sewer engineering type costs, which you can only borrow for 5 years. So the cost, the 200,000, I had to pay it quicker, so that's where rates went up. Not rates, but I had to pay principal quicker for some of the items.
Did
that we
those
listed
rates,
there.
did that go away when it was done, or was that not excluded debt?
Water and sewer, it doesn't
They're
Yeah.
enterprise, they wouldn't
They're
affect.
enterprise,
They're
exactly.
enterprise, so
Yeah.
it's through the rate. There's no
Right.
exclusion
Yeah,
of water and
it's-
sewer.
yeah.
Okay,
It's all
I'm just
through
trying to
rate.
think,
Right.
if that's done, I mean, what's gonna happen to the water and sewer rate then? Is it gonna stay the same?
There'll be more needs.
There'll be
There'll be
something
more
else.
needs.
So,
Yeah, there'll be something else.
But the water and sewer don't affect any of this, that's all enterprise town.
Right.
I know that.
Well, in some ways-
Working in Worcester.
in some ways it might, because if you apply town funds to water and sewer problems, then you don't have the town funds to spend and you have to borrow the
But
money.
you can't really
You
spend
don't
town
spend
funds.
town
You
funds on
can't.
water and sewer.
Well, you can through ARPA.
Well, that's ARPA is different.
It's still town money.
Yeah.
So
You could apply ARPA funds to other town projects or to water and sewer, and they did.
Yeah, they
Right,
did. I mean,
exactly.
Palm Augusta,
That was like the
yeah.
biggest,
Right.
biggest
But,
expense so far.
yeah, but they're
Yeah.
gonna have Joe's gonna have plenty of other expenses with water and sewer.
Right.
And, you know, his enterprise is only gonna support so much. To take one of those big projects away from him in the long run helps him.
Okay. So Becky, bottom line, going into this year's capital improvement year, what would be, so if we wanted to keep the levy at 1.75, we could have no money to borrow.
Correct.
Well,
For 2024, if you wanted to keep the non-excluded tax burden at 175, you wouldn't borrow any
Okay.
money. That would be 547, no,
Do you-
484,000.
do you have any idea what free cash may end up being? Is that in your,
The
your
age-old
ballpark?
question.
Well, you know, that's where we
I
make a
know,
lot of our
I know,
recommendations.
I know.
If there's free cash, we can recommend a few
Right,
things.
right.
If there isn't,
Right, we're getting closer, we're not there yet. I know the money for the sale of the
Rutland
259 Main Street
Oh.
is in FY '20, because anything would have had to happen by June 30th of 2022.
right.
I need the funds, that type of stuff. So the money and the final sale of 259 Main Street happened, which was about 250,000. I know when I looked at this is just a quick look at we had 57,000 at the end of this year
Hello.
that rolled into,
Like,
that will roll into FY '22's free cash.
Yeah.
The expense report looked like, she hasn't finished closing anything out, but it looked like there may have been 500,000 in unexpended appropriations. So that's about 750.
So somebody didn't take
Ballpark.
and balance the budget?
There's a bump.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Tom Galvin. I'm a member of the select board.
Okay?
How you doing?
Just for our viewers.
Yeah, who didn't, we're on?
Yeah.
We're live here?
We're supposed to be being taped.
Oh, okay.
Started at 6:30.
I thought it
magic
was
cameras
7.
in the ceiling.
What's that?
6:30.
Oh, I thought it's, my email's, okay, well,
Okay.
sorry.
It's all right.
So,
Thanks for joining us, Todd.
I appreciate it, sorry about that.
Okay.
I guess the takeaways I got from this is, I don't know that I question if we could ever get to 5% debt, non-excluded debt within, non-excluded debt. I
Right.
don't see that happening, because what that would require is to take,
It's like a debt summary.
take away from other areas of the budget in order to fund debt. And I don't know that that's even
Right,
realistic.
because
but
we've already
because it's already
paid
allocated.
things off,
Yeah.
exactly, and we're already at that 1.74, so.
So where I see the opportunity on non-excluded debt is coming up in, I think we've missed the boat on the 35.7. Or maybe we haven't, that drops.
No, correct,
Okay,
that's
so we
20.
haven't dropped, okay, so we have
So
the
that would be
opportunity.
2025.
Okay, we have the
We missed the
opportunity.
boat on that 60.
On the 60 is what we missed the vote on, yep. So the 35.7, there's an opportunity there, if we can determine what that translates to in terms of total borrowing, and we can use that sheet there, I
Right,
think, is
as a
try to
ballpark.
back into that.
Yeah,
And then in addition to that, in 2026, we've got an additional, 95,000 that falls off, that could also be backfilled within the levy. And then if we look beyond that, that's when we start talking about the bigger opportunities, but that's in the excluded realm. That's where we'd have to start looking at, that's when the
Doing
elementary
something
school
excluded. Yeah.
well, in 2024, we've also got the heights and the ambulance coming, so, it's almost like we gotta look at, break them up into two buckets, not excluded and excluded.
Right.
And I don't know if it's even realistic to even consider that 80/80 number, trying to get to 5% of the budget.
Yeah, I
within the
don't
levy.
think so either,
Yeah.
I would be curious to see further back what that percentage was.
Right.
Because it's clearly dropping pretty quickly from 2021.
Right. And when I started, we had boatloads of debt, and we've just been chunking away at it, chunking away at it, so. Do you know, Joe, if we were ever at a 5%?
I don't think we were
Yeah.
ever at 5%. I'd have to look back too, but I don't know that we were ever there.
Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yeah.
Is this the economic development?
No.
I'm in the wrong
CIPC.
meeting.
I
This is capital
I
improvement plan.
apologize.
We're talking-
I'm in the wrong meeting, I'm like, something's wrong here.
We were getting excited, we haven't
Can I
had
have
someone
that
here in a while.
Can I get that back?
Oh, yeah,
Just 'cause
I'm
it's like I
sorry.
gave mine away.
I'm like, something's not working.
What are they
What's
talking
wrong here?
about?
I'm like, I'm in the wrong
It's
place.
like
Sorry,
high
guys.
school.
I apologize.
No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere 2-3% maybe is doable. I think 4's out of the range, 5's definitely not gonna work.
A bigger picture, I'm wondering, Ron Sanangelo really put this on us to look at possible borrowing
Right,
projects.
and I think that was kind of coming from me saying that stuff is dropping off. You want to
Okay.
keep it at a level, so
All right.
it's something,
Well, I didn't.
and
we
that was
didn't-
that 60 coming off.
We didn't really discuss with Gary, he sat in with us last month.
Right, yeah,
And-
that was supposed to be here, sorry.
Well, that's all right, I mean, we had enough to discuss with him.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he wants us to keep pushing this issue. I mean, mostly we've been dealing with smaller items, and some, yes, the ambulance a couple of years ago.
Right,
We helped push that through and stuff, but in terms of bond packages, we haven't worked on those.
right. So like the
Yeah.
roads, I think you, or
Mhm.
roads and paving and that type of stuff was the one thing that you had mentioned. There's still that town hall is not handicap accessible.
No.
I'll
There's
just
a
say
lot
that,
of
that's, those big things like that are the things that
Oh.
they seem overwhelming, I think, and it's like,
There's a lot of those things.
Right.
That's one thing Ron did for us was he got that facilities study done.
right, right.
And it kind of opened our eyes to a lot of the needs
Mhm.
all around us,
Mhm.
everywhere. This
Yeah.
building, that one,
Yeah,
the next
yeah.
one. There's not a building here that doesn't need something.
Correct,
And how do you fund all of that?
right,
And he also wanted us to look at all the parking lots around the cities, the town schools and the town hall and the library and everything, and look at a bond package to try and do those. And we got estimates from Joe Buckley and whatnot, but.
how much was that? Was that a $2 million?
It was less than that, I
It
think.
was less.
Yeah. It's a lot of paving, but it's
Right around it.
simple paving, it's not highway design.
Mhm.
He had gotten quotes from a number of people, which have
Right.
probably gone up by now. You
It's
know?
about $1 million.
Yeah, I thought it was like 1.2 or something.
Does that include the
I act-
schools and all the?
Oh, yeah.
That
Yeah.
includes some of the access roads, some of the access roads, other ones in the Rutland Heights, even though they lead to the schools, wouldn't be part of
Right,
that work. No, and I'm just wondering, it was probably the debt falling off that
Yeah.
started pushing us to, he wanted somebody to start looking into it.
yeah.
All right.
So I guess this is helpful.
It gives
You
you a
know,
ballpark.
Well, it does, and in the immediate future, I think it's that 35.7 we want to have a conversation about. Doesn't amount to a huge amount of total debt,
Mhm.
but there's still something that I'm sure can be done that makes sense to borrow for. that could backfill that 35.7 rather than seeing it go back into whatever else. And then beyond that, we're looking at, some more significant numbers of total borrowing for bigger type projects in the coming years after that.
And to understand that better, I still feel like it could be useful to have a better sense of what we were looking at retroactively earlier than 2021 as the percentage to know what's realistic to get to. If we're not going for 5, is it 3? Is it 3.5?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, 2.5. I'm sure it levels out at some point.
Right.
The only
Well, if
thing
you
that-
look at, you've got 2.19 back in 2021, and it's dropping from there, so maybe it's the 2. Maybe it's 2, I could, where's my pen? Flying.
The only thing I would say, Dan, I don't disagree with you in a perfect world, but in essence, to get to a higher percentage of non-excluded debt as a percentage of your budget, in essence, you're taking funds from other line items in the budget that money's already funding. So you're in essence taking away a service somewhere that's been funded through that money. And that's why I'm saying, I don't know if we can get much
Go
higher than the
backwards.
1.75 where we
At this
already
point,
are.
yeah.
At a minimum, we want to make sure we stick to the 35, backfilling that 35.7. It probably makes sense too to go back in history and see the number, to see where
Yeah,
we
for
were
a
at one
broader-
time. I just
broader
don't see us
picture.
getting there again, at least in the near future.
I think that you both raise good points. I think, let's see where we were in the past. And if it's reasonable, if we were at 3.5, then 2% is no big deal, like 2.5.
But even just in terms of rethinking these numbers, if we could adjust this percentage, or if we knew what we were looking at instead of trying to, so like this would assume that we're going up by 3.46%, right? For 2025.
The budget.
So that
right.
number, that 990 number, comes from an assumption of an increase to make that 5% from 1.5 to 1.5.
That assumes that the budget is only going up 3.5%
Right.
to get to this 5% over there.
But if that's based on a flawed premise, then all these numbers are just,
Right.
they're not really helpful.
How do we
Yeah, I see
deal
what you're
with
saying.
stuff that needs to be approved but won't actually be funded for years? I use the fire truck. He can't order it until the money is appropriated, not spent. So where do we put that in? I know 37's coming off and that's a small amount, but when do we do that?
So you could, if you get the approval to borrow it, we could, did we talk about this? Move it to capital stabilization. Like this 35.7, I'm like having a deja vu
Yeah.
moment of moving, like if we don't have to make a payment and we don't finally have the borrowing, you can
Raise and appropriate.
raise and
to-
appropriate it to capital,
Yeah,
capital
Stabilization.
stabilization, so that it holds it, and then
You're gonna do
as
that
the
every year.
payment, yeah, you'd have to do it every year until you actually borrow the funds, and then you could make the payments that you've tucked away out of capital stabilization.
So that would be, that's a good idea. That would be one method of, if you couldn't come up with
Securing it, holding it
a
at
debt package that backs into 35.7, and you want to wait for the additional 65.9 and 30,000 to drop off in 2026 and combine them all.
Yeah,
That would be one way to secure the 35.7, but you'd have to raise and appropriate it into that fund every year within the budget.
so that would hold our
Right.
level at that 1.75 or so.
Right. See, small projects we can probably get through most of the time, but it's the big ones that
Right.
are tough.
Yeah, and those are the things that they haven't done much with, you've been just worrying about paying off the debt, and
Right.
now it's like, okay, we need to
Without
look at some of the big
increasing
things.
above 1.75 now, if you will, or 2, you know?
Becky, with that point, I'm not sure who would make that budget submission request. Whether that, you know, because, you know, I'm sure they're gonna be starting the budget process pretty soon.
Yeah.
And if that request isn't made, then that 35.7 is gonna very easily get allocated somewhere else.
This would be for 2025. So we're doing
Oh, I'm a year ahead of
FY24.
myself.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm a year ahead of myself.
we just have to remember.
We gotta remember to do it, that's the problem.
Well, I'll be looking at stuff next year.
See, I need a diary for 12 months from now.
Yeah.
Okay?
You just had a reminder in my phone.
Okay.
Yeah. So that could have been, well, no, that's excluded. So we're talking about just the non-excluded debt, doing that type of, like, reserving those amounts.
Not excluded debt.
Correct. So reserving them into the budget. So
And that's something that we can do?
I believe so. I'm having a vague recollection that I talked to somebody about that. I can confirm all that.
Okay.
Can I use your pen? I don't know, my pen went flying somewhere. I can't make it. I have to make notes.
Oh, I see.
Did you see it? All right, there it
Yeah.
is. Thanks. Where'd it go?
Mind of its own.
Thank you. All right, so I'll do a few more, go back a few more years and see how much it like what that percentage jumps up, or what it was, maybe 3 or 4 years, 5 years. And then I'll confirm.
Maybe one thing, Dan, going back to your point of trying to grow the level, if that's what sound financial policy is to, you know, have us at a little higher percentage than where we're at, is, I don't know if it's in those financial policies that a percentage of any new monies year over year through revenue, whether it be, you know, additional excise tax or additional real estate tax, whatever it might be, that a portion of that be set aside and not allowed to get into non-debt line items.
Well, we do, it does say 5%, well, 5% of free cash goes to stabilization and capital stabilization
Right.
and OPEB.
And then I'm going beyond that and suggesting the only way I could see us growing the percentage number is allocating a portion of actual new revenue to debt service. Because you can't, I don't think it's realistic to take money from other line items to apply it to debt. So
Right.
you're gonna take money that's not allocated already, and the only money like that would be new revenue, new growth money.
One-time revenue.
No, recurring revenue. That's reoccurring.
Well, I'm wondering, like,
But that would be free cash,
No.
right?
No, so when we start our budget season, we start with our estimates of how much
Revenue.
more money we're gonna have in the next fiscal year versus the current fiscal year coming in through things like excise tax. How much more excise tax are we gonna have next year than we have this year? That's new money. How much more property tax income are we gonna have next year versus this year? That's new money, that's new growth money.
New growth.
So none of that money is spoken for before the budget process. So what I'm thinking is you take a portion of that and agree that a portion of that goes towards debt service and not into other expense type line items.
but how much of that money gets eaten up through
All of it.
additional services?
All of it.
All of it.
All of it
always
right now.
does.
Yeah.
All of it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
That's the issue, but the only way you could possibly ever increase this percentage is to allocate a portion of that money to debt versus
As
to
long as you're
other
not
areas of
causing
the
a
budget.
shortfall.
Yeah, but
somewhere
that's the
else.
challenge, because
Yeah.
every year, you know before the school number comes in, your new growth money is gone, just
Right.
with the increased school budget, every year.
And what's the
What is
average?
the general financial concept for keeping it at or about 5%? Like, what are the downsides to going too much lower or too much higher than
Just so you don't have the wild swings in people's tax
It's just
rates
have a
and that
steady
type of-
number?
Yeah, to have a
There's
steady
no like
number.
particular significance to 5% versus 3% versus 2%?
I think what the intent behind it is there's always ongoing capital needs. And if you kind of target a number like that, it enables you to always, to never get behind in those needs so that down the road, you don't need to borrow like all sorts of money all at once. Like Becky was saying, you don't have a big spike all at
$10
once. The
million,
intent is
yeah,
to
exactly.
spread it and have it even and care for those needs as they come about versus all at once with a big pop and spike in the tax rate.
Becky, Joe, maybe you know, didn't we have a big spike in the tax rates or in that debt service percentage when the schools were built? I mean, they were done within a 5-year period. So you packed a lot of debt on there. So it had to increase that percentage back then. That had to be one of the highest, I would
Yeah,
think.
well, these are all these land acquisitions, elementary funds, the building renovations, all that stuff.
Right.
That goes back.
But that number's pretty much stayed the same while our operating budget has gone up. So the percentage of debt to operating budget came down. Because your payment was here, and your operating budget, so your percentage gets lower. But back then, it had to be pretty high.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Maybe that's where the 5%'s coming
Because your budget was a lot lower.
Having said all this, I'm still not sure how much that is gonna help us.
Well, we're not there yet, but.
We're not there
I think
yet.
for-
Maybe it might be another
It
year
it
out.
certainly is useful in getting a future picture.
Right, so if you come up with projects that seem overwhelming and they're like, well, how are we gonna pay for that? We don't have enough free cash to pay for that. Like, that's where, that's how you borrow. You borrow the funds. And we're at a point where we have the capacity to borrow the funds.
And I think we're probably, guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've done a lot of small projects, 50,000, 70,000. We're now approaching big projects,
Right.
$1 million, $2 million.
Right.
That's where we are in our committee right now. So again, I come back to, at what point do we put a bond together that authorizes them to do this stuff? Because if we wait 2 more years for the fire truck, so to speak, well, now we're out into 2028, not 2024, whatever, 25. So
Right.
that's what's going through my mind is, what do we have, how can we do it, and when does it make sense? I like the idea of moving the money to capital stabilization, so when the time comes, but don't we have to do something before that to allow them to
You
buy
have to
it?
warrant, yeah, you have to authorize the debt. Kind of come up with a plan as to how you're gonna,
And once we borrow the debt, we start paying on it, even though we spent the money or not.
correct. I do a temporary borrowing.
Okay?
So I would do if he doesn't have, we authorize the borrowing at a meeting, Seth goes out and buys a fire truck, we don't have to pay anything for it until
It's delivered.
it's delivered. So I wouldn't borrow the funds until he tells me that this is when I need to pay for it.
Okay.
So,
And if, for example, we authorize the fire truck and then he gets a grant for it, does
you can
that-
rescind the debt.
Okay,
You can also vote to rescind the debt.
all right.
So you're getting approval from the town saying, yes, we're all behind this, buying this $2 million fire truck or whatever. And then I don't borrow the funds until you have to make a payment.
Oh, okay.
And I can also, if, like, say, it's something that's a ongoing project, I can do temporary borrowing. So like, that's what we did with the water and sewers. I did a bond anticipation note. For the first half of the project, we only needed 100,000. The whole thing was 3 million. But we only needed 100,000 from this date to that date. So I did a temporary borrowing for that. And then he needed more money, so I did a temporary borrowing for that. And then it was a 5-year plan. I think I was in year 3, and he's like, I'm gonna be done in year 4. So I'm like, okay, we're borrowing, and plus the rates were low.
Okay.
So we borrowed the whole 3 million, permanently financed last November.
I mean, the two things,
So-
yeah, the most expensive equipment's the fire truck. I mean,
Right.
there's plows and everything else, but the other thing is the roads
Right.
and the parking lot. So if that's 1.2 and you got the fire truck that's about 1.2 or more at this point, that's $2.5 million. Does it, is that able, can you do that temporary borrowing for that until
Yeah.
we do the projects?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So as long as the authorization there is there, it's a bond anticipation note as you, like, especially like with paving the roads, that's, would be like, okay, we did this one this year, it was only, 500,000 to do there. I need to fill that up. Then we're end of a fiscal year, I have to have that money borrowed, otherwise we're in the hole, you know what I mean? So then I temporarily borrow for the next year, and then until it's kind of completed and I need the 2 million.
So
Or whatever
we
it is.
borrow the two, but realistically, we're only looking at the payment in any year.
Correct.
So
That's what these are, the payments,
15
yeah.
years on 2 million would be
That's the roads thing. That's-
road and.
But that's where this comes from. That's
The 2 million.
2 million for 15 years at a 3.85 interest rate would be about $175,000 a year in the
Okay.
payment.
Okay, so. we're
So this is like a good sample. This is the last page of your handout.
Yeah, right, so we're looking at 35, we're looking at 65, 30, 348, so in a matter of 3 years, we've got close to $500,000, not 177,000. So we're still, by getting the major things done, we're still ahead of the curve on that, because he probably won't get the fire truck till 26, 27. The roads can be done. Okay, food for thought.
And I gotta look at the amount of time you can borrow for things is different too. I'm not sure what the time is on a fire truck versus the road. Well, the roads are 15.
I think we did 20 on the fire truck, didn't we?
Well, I'd be surprised if a truck was 20.
Yeah.
Maybe 10.
I'd say 10 on a
Maybe
truck.
10 on that, yeah.
Maybe a fire truck is longer, who knows?
Well,
It's,
that could be two.
right now,
You'd
it's
hope so.
1.5 million, the truck is 1.5 million now. A couple of years ago, it was only 1.1. Amazing how it's changed.
And you can't get it.
You can't get
It's
it.
like ordering a car. Oh,
Yeah.
give me the cash, I'll have it for you in 2 years. Yeah, okay.
I can find out, like, kind of get a summary too of different items, like how long can you borrow for a fire truck versus road repairs versus a building construction, that type of stuff.
I don't think he's gonna look for that this year. I think it's at least one more year out.
It's not, his concern is, I need the money appropriated so I can order it, because it may take 2 to 3 years to get.
Okay.
It's
But-
not that he wants to buy it
Right.
now. So
Well,
I,
it's a
you know,
year-
we'll bring him in here and talk more
Right.
about that, but that was,
I think I know what it
His
is.
concern.
It's a year out before he could even qualify for a bond of some sort. I mean,
Grant.
a grant. No guarantee he'd get it. But there has to be a certain age before he would even qualify for the
well,
grant.
I think we're coming up in 2 years.
Yeah,
I think another year, 2 years, that fire truck is old.
yeah. Okay.
But then again, you've got, like you said, you got the town hall. Revamp that in some way, air conditioning in it, you know? I
Now
mean,
you get really fancy hair.
Seriously, if you put those indoor Mitsubishis,
No,
Access,
yeah, this-
handy,
this little
handicap
thing.
access.
you know, and then
Handicap
Elevator,
access,
whatever.
yeah.
and handicap access.
You do
Yeah.
any major renovations and you're under that, you have to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
OSHA said we have to put in air conditioning.
You have to put in ramps or whatever,
Yeah.
elevator, whatever it
There's one-
takes.
There's one ramp, it's a little scary.
Yeah, but the building doesn't
I
have access.
just remember
Yeah.
the dad, an old man, I don't know if it's an old man or woman, whatever, she was going down the stairs instead of going down the ramp, like over by the assessor's office. And he was, I think it was he was just frustrated. He threw his walker down the stairs and like just went down the stairs and picked his walker up when he went out the door. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, that would be some good shape.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Ah, I'll get it when I get down there." I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. Anyways.
So we got our work cut out for us to get these projects that we think can fit into a bond package.
Right, so when you get a number or something, I mean, I can like, just ask me questions, how many years can you, I can ask Brianne, or we can have her, actually, she would come in, if we asked her to come into a meeting and kinda,
It doesn't have to be a bond package just for the town hall. It could be multiple
Yeah.
correct.
things wrapped together.
As long as they fit
Yeah.
within that time frame.
Not necessarily, and that's where the water and sewer thing is, because there was, their whole capital plan had things that only had 5-year lifespan, and things that had, I could borrow for 10 years, and things that I could borrow for 20 years, so that's the way it was complicated. If you look at the whole final schedule, it's all over the place, but, the principal payments are gonna be higher up front for a smaller project,
Yeah.
so.
Thanks.
So you can combine them all, but you just gotta age it out.
Any other questions for Becky? I don't want to hold her up here any longer than she has to be here. Becky?
And you
Thank
you.
can't build in a lot of the engineering costs into long-term bond. That's,
You mean the study to see how much it's
Yeah,
gonna cost? and
because,
everything?
I mean, a facilities study throws out a lot of numbers, but quite honestly, I don't trust a lot of them. I don't think they were put together by proper engineering teams and stuff.
Mhm.
You know, they were guesstimates, I think. And so they'd still need engineering studies.
Right,
And-
to
and
come up
I-
with
it-
final
there's
plans.
A couple of these smaller projects that have been included in the ARPA funds are just for the engineering studies.
Correct.
And those aren't even huge projects. It kind of baffled us why it would cost so much for windows,
Yeah.
a study for windows, you know?
Try not to use the word study too much, because studies get lost and you spend a ridiculous amount of money on them, and then you don't do anything with the study.
Right, well, that was the fear.
So
You
as
throw in
a-
$30,000 or $50,000 way here or there.
This was brought up with Gary, and I can't remember what the item was. I don't have
It
it.
was the windows in a couple of locations.
Yeah, so-
Here,
The siding,
and it-
right, siding.
And the siding and the windows.
So
and-
as a ARPA committee member, what we had mentioned to Gary, and we'll mention it to you, because I don't know if he brought it back or not, but anything that you allocate study dollars for with ARPA funding, knowing that there's like 900 some odd of ARPA funding left, it might be a good idea to allocate what the estimate is that the study is gonna show. So if it's $25,000 to do the study on the the infiltration of the water on the public safety building, and the estimate that we have in hand from that facility study is that it's gonna cost 250 grand to actually fix the problem once the study is done, to set aside that 250 out of the 9, so that when the study is done and completed, we actually have money to do something, and the study just doesn't get wasted,
Right.
you know?
Because, yeah, you spend the study and then the rest of the ARPA funds would go for something else.
Right, and then the study is sitting on a shelf collecting dust and the work never gets done.
Yeah.
It does, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Everywhere. I've never been, like, that costs too much, we can't do that. I'll take that back to the committee.
Yeah, because the siding and the windows and the infiltration, those were all things that fell into that category.
That infiltration's a big one, too.
Yeah.
That's probably the most important.
That's probably
Yeah,
the biggest one there.
you know, for the windows and stuff like Gary said,
Why do you need a study?
why do you need a study?
Put windows in a building.
Yeah.
Get quotes. Get quotes. Matching quotes.
Yeah.
It's Gary. Gary's like, I'll do it, right?
Becky, we've asked you a lot of stuff tonight, but is there anything we haven't asked you that you think is pertinent to our committee?
No, you gotta just put this debt stuff on your radar that, you know, for some of those big projects, because I know do a lot of the free cash stuff.
That's easy.
But, yeah, exactly. And the big projects, again, I think they're overwhelming too, but we can have our financial advisor come in and kind of come up with a real plan to do some of the bigger things that need to be done with a bond package. 'Cause I think we're at that point where stuff is coming off, and it would be good for the town to show we've got some infrastructure going in. You know.
Excuse me. Do you meet with the finance committee like this too?
When I have my budget hearing and stuff like that,
But not
And I-
into detail like we go.
no. I give them this, and I do say when I'm doing the debt budget, that I think I did last year, said that, you know, debt's coming off, we need to come up with a plan, borrow.
Wonder are there any other really big ticket items on the radar? New buildings or major building renovations we don't know about?
I have to look, for me, I have to look through that facility study.
Oh, that's,
I know there's stuff on there I haven't really looked over.
there was talk about a building committee in town, and I don't know.
Well, that's
if
the
that'll-
problem. We have a lot of requests that have come in,
Right.
and we've always struggled as a CIPC of prioritizing all the different building-related requests. And that's why at one time there was a building committee that was talked about to,
Margaret
because at some
was
point we
started.
can't do them all. At some
Right.
point we're gonna come to an agreement, okay, we're gonna put our focus and our energy on getting the town hall done.
Right.
Whatever that may
Right.
entail, and everything else is gonna get backburnered until that project is off the
Right.
ground, funded and ready to go.
Yeah.
And we just haven't been able to, as a town, as a whole, figure out what that focus is, you know?
Does anybody know, like, the capacity of the, I hate to say it, the schools?
No.
Like the center, because that's I don't know if there's any talk of any of that, or,
Well, we
you know.
we do send every year the capital request to the school committee, just like we
Right.
do all our town departments. And to my knowledge, building itself or addition to a building hasn't been brought up in a 5-year plan that they presented to
Right.
us.
That's good.
We fixed,
I didn't see anything.
Yeah.
well, we fixed gutters, we fixed doors, we fixed all
Right.
this other stuff with
Yeah, there was
schools.
something,
But we
security cameras or something
Yeah.
like that, is that up there?
Yeah,
That
who was it we
was,
supposed to run that, the principal?
Yeah, that, part of
Dave,
that,
right.
part of that was state funded,
Okay.
and then we had some part in it.
That was the trial balloon that was state funded for the security cameras and whatnot, but, yeah, they wanted that big deal, but I don't know if that was gonna go anywhere.
All right, well, you can email me if you have any other follow-up. I'll do some more research on the couple of things that we have here.
The only thing that might be helpful, and I know we can probably figure this out, Becky, but it might be good to have a fine-tuned number. What the total borrowing ability would be, the 35, the 65.9, and the 30. All the non-excluded debt falling off between now and 2026, what that would amount to as far as a total amount to borrow for whatever, 15 years or 20 years.
Yeah, what, 1.7?
And whatever
Yeah.
whatever reasonable rate is. I don't think it's
Yeah.
1.7 anymore.
It's not 1.7, it's 3.8 something
Yeah.
already.
No, I mean being within the operating budget limit of 1.7,
Oh,
not the
okay,
borrowing
yeah,
rate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, if our payment's about that much, yeah, okay.
Divided by 1.7. I am just surprised.
I can't remember if I actually have a copy of that, but facility study.
If you don't, I'll say, I think I still have a hard copy of it.
Yeah. We had passed it around, but we didn't all have one.
I've got a copy if you want it. I
Uh,
don't have it with me, but I can get it to you.
Let me check.
Joe,
I know my notes.
do you
How much for
remember
this?
when the operating budget was 15
How much can I borrow for this
million?
much?
Huh?
Do you remember when the operating budget was 15 million?
Oh, yeah. I remember when it was 12 or 13 million.
Yeah.
Yep.
And now we're looking at a possible 60 million in another 20 years. And I wonder if our population growth is gonna be as good.
It's going. It's going.
Okay.
All righty.
Becky, thank you so much for
All right,
coming
Thank you for
today.
coming in.
Appreciate
No
it.
problem. I'll follow up with little more pieces of information.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Any comments on where you think we go from here?
Well, the easy stuff is have Gary get information back to us from the different departments and their yearly needs. I mean, we can predict some line items right here,
I think
you know?
I think we're really at a point where we're gonna have a conversation with, because whatever we do is gonna require some planning, but not just planning, cooperation.
Right.
And I think we're at a point where we need to have a conversation with both the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee and align on what the direction should be. Specifically talking about the non-excluded debt that falls off between now and 2026. Because if we want to, everyone has to be on the same page. If when that 35-7 falls off, which is 2 years before the other stuff falls off, and we want to set it aside in however format we set it aside, everyone's got to be on the same page there. Because they can't want to take that 35-7 and put it towards the operating budget.
And we try to put a motion on the, right, you know.
Even getting to that point, we had discussed that a lot of this, when some of this stuff was put in front of us several years ago, that we didn't have the expertise to know what it would cost, the design work and everything for a lot of these building projects. Now, that big building report is a step in the right direction, but they wanted to put together a building committee just to oversee getting a lot of these big projects done. And it sounds like, to me, we're almost trying to take that on ourselves and decide what would go in a bond package for the various building needs, the community center and the town hall and this. They'll all end up adding big money.
Part of our charge in the original draft of what was done is that we were responsible for trying to keep the tax rate level. Yes, you have your 2.5, but our job is not to explode it. So if we can put these things together and keep the tax rate, then we've accomplished one of our jobs. Again, it's not our job to go out and build the thing. Our job is to
Or even do the engineering studies.
present the
Right.
stuff so the town can take a look at, this is what we need to do our job, or to help the town. Because we're not talking we're talking close to $20 million worth of future expenditures here.
Right, and
So-
that's all capital expenses.
Absolutely. And what needs to be done, from buildings to roads to you name it, so. All I'm trying to do is to get a bond package that gets us started in some direction. Because we're just picking we're picking the bones. We're picking bones, that's all.
But the
we're
only
doing.
way we can do that is if we're in agreement across the board that's, to me, it's a bunch of wasted energy and exercises and everything else to even come up with a project that is worth moving forward unless we're in agreement that the funds dropping off from debt service are going to be reallocated back into debt service
I
for
agree,
that
John.
project.
I agree, 100%.
So, I think we should maybe propose a joint meeting between the three committees, boards, committees, and have that conversation about what the desire there is. And if there's a desire and agreement that that's the direction we're gonna head, and Becky provides what the total amount to be borrowed would be based on those three numbers when they come off, then we can have a good conversation about, okay, what's our priority to use that funding for?
Right.
And agree that the 35-7 in debt service isn't gonna be put into an operating budget. It's gonna be kept aside for debt for the time when we borrow.
When do you think would be a good time?
I think any time before the budget season.
Which is?
You know, what are
March?
we're in September. No. They're gonna
Oh,
probably
you think in
start then.
November?
Yeah. In the fall, they're probably gonna start. It probably won't really ramp up until winter.
But that won't be this year that's coming off, though.
No, but I think
Right.
it's still having that foresight and having the conversation about, it's only one more year. I
Okay.
know it's not falling off of the fiscal year they're gonna be planning for, but again,
Maybe shoot for November, December.
Should we
Yeah.
ask Gary's help in setting that up between the different
Yeah.
committees?
I can reach out to them, you know, too, but my concern here then is that how do we put our list, how do we get our stuff together before that? So we are prepared.
I don't
for
know that we need to, because again, I think this is the first thing. What's the point of us coming up with a list if no one is on the same page that we're gonna fund it? You know,
Okay.
before we come up with a list, we gotta make sure there's an agreement to support what might come out of that effort.
Yeah, I think a couple of things would have to happen. That would have to happen first,
Yeah.
and then it'd have to be a decision of, is it gonna start in 2027, or is it gonna start in 2025? And then, depending which approach, you know, that like Becky was talking about. And then from there, then you'd have a better understanding of what kind of money you're looking at, and then you can start to try to back end it in.
Okay.
But we're a couple steps away from
Mike,
that.
do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But then there's a smaller list we go through, all the yearly items we get.
Well,
Those will be
60,000,
BAU.
Yeah.
We'll still
70,000.
deal with those like we always have, yeah.
Right, right.
Standard
This is
process.
the big stuff. Okay, so FinCom and select.
And we're
board.
still waiting for those submissions. I don't know if Gary has taken any action on that.
Well,
we're not at the
they're due
deadline
by
yet.
October 1st,
Yeah,
so.
Is that what was, yeah, October. Yeah,
it's not far off.
no, it's
No.
not, it's gonna come quick.
Maybe almost time for a reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We-
have they even been sent out?
I saw Gary, they didn't have a chance to talk to him,
Okay.
so. I sometimes get the feeling when I talk to some of these boards and committees that we already sent you the list. We got the 5-year list. I really don't have anything else,
Well,
you know?
we can go through that list. We
So,
have that.
but what I'm looking for are the additions that may
Right.
have been
And that's
missed.
fine, if that's what they come back with, then
Yeah.
they're right, we have it.
Maybe
And
the
if-
quotes that go along with,
But this is their opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, he wants a sweeper, and, you know, how much is it gonna cost? And you got quotes, is there a state list where you can,
Yeah, I didn't get, can you forward that, Harry?
I'll forward that to you guys. He's looking for $215,000, but he wants it out of ARPA funds. So your point,
It's gonna, that 980 is
setting
gonna
that
go
aside,
quick. Yeah.
that'll go very
Yeah.
fast.
So I really,
Yeah.
I feel strongly about studies. I mean, there's some cases when they're definitely needed, but if they're just gonna they're gonna spend money on a study and there's no way to fund what's gonna come from that study,
That-
don't
right.
bother with it.
Right.
don't bother with it.
Or if
you're
the
not gonna
study's
put
gonna
aside
be
the money.
4 years
Right.
down the road and it's meaningless now to get it done.
But
So-
that sweeper, that doesn't come under the revenue accounts, that's streets.
Which should come out of enterprise funds.
Enterprise, well,
I don't know.
it's kind of a street sweeper. Yeah, it affects the sewer system and the runoff system, but I don't know, that's a fine line.
See, I think that if there's a hard rain, that's a street sweeper by itself.
Yeah, but
But
that's what's
all that
washing
goes-
everything in.
But see, that's why you need the street sweeper, is because the sewer, which should come out of enterprise funds. That's my backing into it.
Yeah. And there's arguments
And I'll
to be made
stand
the other
by
way. I don't know. And
Okay, anything else, guys?
I don't know. that's-
Next meeting,
Okay.
try to have it for the library again. November's coming up.
So we're looking October, come on.
So probably we wanna meet after we get requests sent, submitted to us, right?
Yeah,
And that's supposed to be the 1st, or thereabouts.
well, to give Gary time, if somebody's a little late, I was thinking the second week in October.
12th to 13th.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Either
13th.
works for me.
Thursdays are generally much better for me.
That-
I
Okay, I
like
was gonna
Thursdays.
recommend Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan, so let's do October 13th. It's not Halloween. Ten, 13, Thursday. At 6:30. We're getting into the fall season, winter season. Is 6:30 okay? Still okay with you? Okay. All right, got it. we have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, let's adjourn. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
What time you got?